Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Arsenal Roundup by Arsenal Unfiltered. Happy New Year's Eve. I hope you have a wonderful evening planned. Today, I'm going to be looking back at 2024 for Arsenal and coming up with my moment of the year, game of the year, surprise of the year, but also player of the year. Let's get into it. Yes, welcome back. It is the Arsenal Roundup, episode 3, a special episode today. We are doing a 2024 year review and giving out some prizes and some awards. Now, the Arsenal Roundup is obviously a news programme, but as it is New Year's Eve, we're not going to cover the news. We are going to do something slightly different to celebrate, 2025 coming in this evening. Peek behind the curtain though, it is not New Year's Eve for me. It's currently the 27th at 9 a.m, so I don't know the Ipswich result. I don't know if this is going to be coming out in a really bad mood, but we had a great day yesterday. Spurs lost, Chelsea lost, Man City drew, Man United lost, and Liverpool for a moment my hopes got up when RU scored, but they feel a little bit inevitable at the moment, and we're certainly going to need a team better than Leicester to go and take points off of them. So at the top you heard the prizes that I'm going to be doing for this episode. I'm going to do moment of the year, game of the year, surprise of the year, and then a player of the year. So for some I have just an outright winner, and then for others I've got some discussions around that topic and, talking about through the top 3. These are my picks, they are not necessarily fact, so don't worry if you don't agree. If you don't agree, drop a comment. Spotify allows comments now. I think Apple Podcasts doesn't, but you could throw it in a review if you wanted to, or find me on Blue Sky and drop me a comment there, or drop me a message there. Arsenal-unfiltered.bsky.social, whatever it is. And then, we can have a chat about it. If we've got different views, that's a great thing. I am going to start, however, with surprise of the year, and stick around to the end because that is when I'm going to do my player of the year discussion. So, surprise of the year, and this is a tough one actually because Arsenal have become a relatively stable club under Mikel Arteta, right? We don't have too many things that come completely out of left field for us, and we no longer live in that world where we're getting really strange reports about Raul Sanllehi and Ivan Gazidis, and we don't live in the world where we drop an Andre Arshavin transfer on February the 2nd or whatever it was. There seems to be a lot more of a plan. There were 2 surprises that I kind of thought about for this segment and looked at for this year. None of them sort of match related because I think it's tough to call any result a surprise or surprise of the year at least, because football is all about variance and things can change and things can be very strange and very different on a football pitch, but it's off the football pitch where we get the real surprises. My highly commended surprise of the year is the Raheem Sterling signing on loan. We'd obviously been in for Sesko earlier in the summer, and we were apparently very interested in Nico Williams as well. And there is continued reports that Arsenal are still looking at those 2 players and still considering them, even though Nico Williams has probably had a less than stellar performance so far this season. But that only got highly commended for me in the surprise of the year category because the number 1 surprise for me was the Edu departure on the 4th of November. Now, I don't know if it's just me in this scenario, but I didn't see that coming. Edu and Arteta had become like not a Jekyll and Hyde, what's a Laurel and Hardy, that's a better one. For people listening in America and Australia, they might not get that one, but Laurel and Hardy were a comedy duo in the UK back in the day, and they were inseparable. You always saw them together, Ant and Dec as well. And Arteta and Edu had become like that for me at Arsenal. It was tough to imagine that one of them would leave until the reports started coming out about Edu. Certainly when it first came out, I was really surprised, really shocked. I was stood in my kitchen and I got the notification from Sky Sports, and really took me by surprise. Obviously, a lot of the reporting that came out afterwards explained a lot of the scenario around actually the restructure when Vinay left and how Edu was potentially probably he wanted to be more involved in that and getting a higher level job at the club. Perhaps CEO, we don't know. And actually, his relationship with the Nottingham Forest group owner has been strong for many, many years. He is a man who has worked on relationships in the past. He's got lots of relationships in Brazil, and he was offered an opportunity to go and be part of a multi-club model. You know, Forest at the head of it, but Olympiacos as well, a French team, I believe. So he has gone now. Well, he's on gardening leave, but he's not working for Arsenal really. Jason Ato has stepped up in his place, but for me that one really took me by surprise because those two figures, like I say, they seemed foundational to the club at this point. We still don't know who we're going to replace him with. You know, will Jason Ato get the job full time? Mikel Arteta came out and spoke in a press conference when he got lots of questions about that. He was very defiant. Actually, we do have a sporting director or technical director, I can't remember what the journalist asked, and he said Jason Ato by name, so there's clearly a good relationship there. They're working together, and hopefully, you know, if Jason Ato is after this job, hopefully he's working really, really hard to bring us in some attacking reinforcements in the January transfer window. You know, I spoke in my Christmas Day bonus episode, which you're more than welcome to go back and listen to. I spoke about 3 targets who I thought we should potentially go and look at. If Jason Ato is listening, go and listen to that as well. You know, have some of those names ready in your portfolio for Mikel, I think, because I think those players would be fantastic. But, you know, he is now in that position and Edu is on gardening leave. We have been linked with the former Real Sociedad technical director. Can't say his name, can't remember his name, but that one hasn't gone away in terms of a rumour. The Luis Campos one, that rumour kind of popped up and hasn't really been spoken about too much since. And I don't have any connections in this world, so I really couldn't tell you what's going on and what's not going on. But, you know, that one seems a little bit quieter. The Real Sociedad fella, that does not seem to be going away. That continues to be reported on, so I'm interested to see that one. But yeah, surprise of the year. Sorry, Raheem Sterling. You know, it was an interesting signing of him, but it absolutely has to go to Edu leaving Arsenal. So from surprise of the year to moment of the year, and the way I thought about this was actually not just, you know, a result, not just a great result, but actually something that really, really meant something for Arsenal this year. And I think on the game of the year, I will talk about one of those that I think could have been in this, and which was the result in February against Liverpool, the 3-1 victory. So sneak preview of game of the year nominees there. But for me, and I don't know, look, this is my opinion of things. This may be skewed by the fact that I actually managed to get to the Emirates for this moment. But for me, the penalty win over Porto was so incredible. It was a real moment for our club. We hadn't been back in the Champions League knockout rounds for a long time, and we arrived and we got a draw against Porto. And let's face it, the first leg was really rough. We were away from home. Porto were doing that thing where that European teams used to do all the time, where, you know, at the corners they were just dropping down, pretending to have been fouled and stopping our momentum. They were going down at the lightest touch, and the ref totally brought it. They obviously then scored that late absolute golazo from, I think it was Galeno who scored it from outside the area. And, you know, at 0-0, I think we could have gone back and been really, really confident and not worried. At 1-0, I think we were still confident, but it really required quite an effort. And obviously Trossard got that goal. Fantastic Martin Odegaard assist. Do we all remember that? That little shimmy and then the pass through for Trossard just to pull off a Thierry Henry-esque finish in, I think, around the 40th minute. And then we weren't able to muster another goal. To be fair to them, Porto were very good. Like let's be honest, across that tie, they were a real challenge. And I do wonder if those Champions League games against Porto, and especially against Bayern, you know, because Bayern was either side of the Villa game, which, you know, if we were doing a low moment of the year, that would be up there. I do wonder if they took so much out of our legs that we just didn't have enough for the two games we didn't win in that run-in at the start of 2024. Villa and Manchester City. Did these games just take it out of our legs too much? I don't know, but the reason I'm giving it as my moment of the year is the penalty shootout and the kind of the David Raya heroics. He saved 2 penalties on the night. He did a fantastic job, and I think at that point we were like, oh wow, this keeper has arrived for us. Aaron Ramsdale was still at the club at that time. He was on the bench, and the media was still doing that thing whenever anything happened for David Raya on the pitch, because he did have a slightly shaky start, they'd pan to Aaron Ramsdale. And I'm telling you what, on this night, they did not pan to him because David Raya was superb in that penalty shootout. And when he saved that final penalty, it felt like he arrived as our keeper. There were still people, even though he was starting to prove his worth at this point, I think there were still people who were looking and thinking, but we really liked Ramsdale. And actually, this fella had a kind of not shocking, unsteady start. And we haven't yet seen anything that makes us go, he's our guy. I think this was the moment for him. And probably emotionally as well, really made him feel part of the club. It was really important we got through. We couldn't return to the knockout rounds of the Champions League and then just fall out without a fight. David Raya helped us do that, and we got through, and we obviously had a fantastic first leg against Bayern Munich. Things didn't go so well after that in the second leg, but that was my moment of the year for sure. David Raya's double penalty save in the penalty shootout against Porto. Fantastic for us as a club to get back to winning Champions League knockout rounds. Hello everyone, just going to interrupt this episode of the Arsenal Roundup and say a real thank you for listening to this episode. And for listening to any episode that I've released this year. It's obviously the end of 2024 when you're listening to this, so Happy New Year and a big thank you for any support you've given either to the podcast or on Blue Sky this year. If you have enjoyed anything I've put out, then there is one really simple thing you can do to help me out and help Arsenal Unfiltered grow as a podcast, and that's go and hit the follow button wherever you get your podcasts from. That will mean that every episode that I release, which is 3 a week by the way, 2 match reviews usually, and hopefully an episode of the Arsenal Roundup, you'll get that straight into your podcast provider absolutely free for nothing. So all you have to do is go and click follow. That would really, really help me out and make sure that you see all of the new episodes exactly when they come out. Thank you very much. Have a really fantastic and safe New Year's Eve, a great New Year's Day. So, on to the big 2, Game of the Year and then Player of the Year as well. Game of the Year is a tough one for me. 2024 has been brilliant as an Arsenal fan. We haven't lifted the trophies we wanted to. We came so close to that Premier League trophy, and had it not been for that Aston Villa game, or you could say the Fulham games in 2023, we would be Premier League champions right now. So we've had a fantastic year. We have seen some fantastic performances, and of course, we got that really niche record, but I think it's important. First team to score 5 or more goals away from home. Away from home 6 times in a calendar year, 6 times. A couple of those are involved in this. One of those is involved in this Match of the Year, Game of the Year award, and they're spread all over the year. Let's start with the one I've already mentioned on this podcast, which came in February, and it was the first real test of Arsenal in the run-in. We'd come out of that tricky Christmas period, and we thought, hey, we are going to have to go on a storming run here to keep pace with Manchester City because they were starting to gather their usual steam. And our first test came at home versus Liverpool, and we passed it with flying colours. Let's be honest. We beat them 3-1 in February. We had a goal from Saka, Gabriel Martinelli, and Leandro Trossard. But you've got to remember, that was that weird game where we had that very odd own goal from Gabriel Magalhaes just before half-time. And we dominated the first half. We really showed our quality, I think. But we showed our grit and our mettle at that point, where basically the last kick before half-time, we went back to 1-1. And I remember being absolutely gutted because, we'd played Liverpool in the Cup not too far previous to this game. And we'd been better than them, I think, for long periods of the game until we tied at the end and they nicked 2 goals. And look, Liverpool are a great team. They can do that to you. They can beat you however they want to beat you. So to come into this game and be 1-0 up and dominating them again and concede right before half time, I did not want the same thing to happen. I really didn't. I was very, very concerned. It was our first challenge on the run-in, like I said. And it felt like it was slipping away from us right before half time, but we came back out absolutely firing. The Gabriel Martinelli goal and then the Leandro Trossard goal right at the end with that brilliant piece of skill. Look, it was a fantastic result. We did brilliantly. And Liverpool made a couple of mistakes, yeah, but we really took advantage of it, and I loved that game. However, it hasn't got my game of the year. That is in third place for me. And in second place, we have a far more recent one. Far more recent one. Let me take you back 1 month to November, and the conversation is starting. Do Arsenal score enough? Have we got enough, firepower in our team? Martin Odegaard was out injured, and during that period, we were really thinking, "Oh, okay, this is not good. We are looking a little bit ropey here." But then came 2 games: Arsenal 3, Nottingham Forest 0. That was a great moment because Forest are flying in the Premier League this year, and good teams are not able to get past them. Spurs have just lost to them yesterday, so they are really producing some stunning results. However, it was the next game that reaches second place in my game of the year. That is Arsenal 5, Sporting 1. Do we score enough? Well, absolutely. I think we do. We got 5 in this game. Gabriel Martinelli, Kai Havertz, Big Gabby, Saka and Trossard all picking them up. 5 different goal scorers just after the 3-0 versus Forest. I think people were looking at this as a real test. Victor Gyökeres was on the other team, and we've spoken about him for so long now as a potential Arsenal or Manchester United target who should be playing in the Premier League. Gabriel and Saliba bullied him all day long, and that was the match that actually kind of put me off signing him. If I was Jason Ato and had the checkbook, I wouldn't be looking at Victor Gyökeres anymore, because it's clear he can score goals, right? He's done that for a long time in Portugal, and he can do a really good job. But he was given a test against 2 of the best that there are, and he wasn't at that level. And we need to go to teams like Liverpool, teams like City, who have Van Dijk, who have Konate, Diaz, Stones, these world-class centre-backs, and we need to get past them and beat them. And Gyökeres failed at the first hurdle there with Saliba and Gabriel, the other centre-backs in the league of that quality. So for me, he really failed that test. We played him out of the game brilliantly. And we just were so good at exploiting the fact that they were playing a 3-4-3. Amorim had just left, and they didn't have a proper 6, and they didn't have proper fullbacks. And I think a lot of the times Arsenal fans are keen to. We sometimes point, or certainly Arsenal fans in the circles I run in, are keen to point out, well, we did well because the opposition did this and the opposition did that, and that is a big part of it. But we have to acknowledge that sometimes we're just really good, and you can only beat the team in front of you. This was a day like that. Everyone thought this was going to be a big test, and they were looking the other way. They were looking at Victor Gyökeres and can he go and destroy Arsenal? He wasn't even in the game, and we destroyed them. And I thought it was a real narrative shift for our season of actually, there are plenty of goals in this team. There are plenty of goals in the team. We just sometimes struggle against low blocks. If you come and try and play us, we will slap you up. That is basically what this game felt like to me. We have obviously still struggled since against low blocks. But, I think we've done a really good job of scoring when teams come and play us. So that is second place in match of the year. But for me, the best match, and maybe it's because I am originally from sort of the just outside the North London area, and London derbies really, really matter to me. But my match of the year is Arsenal 5, Chelsea 0. Now, this is the first of 4 games. It was in, let me just check my notes. It was in April, so key point of the run-in. We're still technically in it at this point, and Manchester City, I believe they're behind us, but have games in hand at this point, and we come up against Chelsea in the first of 4 games, including Chelsea, Spurs and United. I think Bournemouth were in there as well, and how they're doing this year shows that wasn't a bad result either. We'd gone out of the Champions League 2 games ago as well, so we were coming off some disappointment. We just recovered against Wolves, but there was still that sting in the air, and we needed a lift. We definitely needed a lift. A tough week that was. 2-2 against Bayern, lost to Villa, and then lost to Bayern. 5-0 against Chelsea. I mean, talk about a lift. That's fantastic. We had a goal from Leandro Trossard, 2 from Ben White, and then deliciously, absolutely deliciously, we had 2 from Kai Havertz against his old team. The team who laughed at us when we paid 65 million for him. That has certainly died, that narrative, hasn't it? He has killed that because he's been brilliant in 2024, and I think this was his performance of 2024 as well. Scored 2 brilliant goals. His best goal for Arsenal, I think, the one where he's running across Cucurella, I believe, and just slams it in the top of the net. The goalkeeper has no chance. The reason why this wins for me, is all of the context. All of the context. It's a London derby. Chelsea had so often been our better, unfortunately, over the past, let's say, 15 years. Oh no, it's 2024. Over maybe the last 20 years, let's say, since our Invincibles win, can you say Chelsea have been better than us? Absolutely they can. They've had 2 Champions Leagues in that time, and that's really painful for us as Arsenal fans. And actually, we'd spent a couple of seasons much, much better than them, and this was almost like the victory that really stamped it down for me. And we've owed these teams one. Every so often, the big teams dish out a drubbing to the other big teams, and too often we've been on the wrong end of those drubbings. So I really enjoyed watching us dish one of those out, and to dish one out to Chelsea, one of our biggest rivals, and really the only other team in London who have competed with us as the best team in London. What a great game, and for Kai Havertz to score 2, it felt so good. So Arsenal 5, Chelsea 0 in April is my game of 2024. And the final award for this 2024 review is Player of the Year. So obviously not Player of the Season, because seasons span 2 years. This is the Player of 2024 for me, obviously. And I've picked a third, second and first, like I did with the Match of the Year. And I'm going to start in third place with Gabriel Magalhaes. Now, William Saliba absolutely could have been in this conversation. I wanted one of these guys in the conversation for Player of the Year, because defenders, they just don't get enough love. And actually, if you took, well, we've seen it, right? We've seen it before. If you take Saliba or Gabriel out of this team, we do not look as good in so many aspects of the game. Not just defending our own box, but actually the way we dominate opponents. Gabriel and Saliba are instructed to go flying up the pitch when there's a transition, to try and stop that transition. The first pass into the forward, they are there 9 times out of 10 to deal with that and help us win the ball back. And their average positions when we're on the ball for defenders are insane. They are so high up the pitch, especially Big Gabby. Like I say, Saliba could have been in this conversation, but the thing that has made Gabby stand out for me just a little bit over Saliba is goals, and I've written that in capital letters on my notes today. He has come up with some clutch goals. I'm thinking of one against Tottenham. I'm thinking of one against Manchester City already this season. He's scored so many, and we are so good at set pieces, and he is a big, big part of that. Both of those players, however, deserve an award for their defensive effort. They are brilliant. Players just do not get past them. I've already spoken in this episode about Gyökeres, but we've seen Haaland as well, just completely marshalled by them this year, a couple of times actually. Players that we don't really see get marshalled by many defences. Gabriel and Saliba can take them on and deal with them all the time. And but in the Liverpool game earlier this season, if we had even one of them for 90 minutes, we would have been absolutely fine and won that game. And I think the title race would look very different right now with us having won that. Well, of course, the points would be very different, wouldn't it? But I think the context and the feeling would be very different as well. Unfortunately, we lost both of them pre the game and then during the game for Gabriel, and we felt that absence really big. So I wanted to include them. I think, there's so many players I could have put in this list, especially at third place. But those guys really, really deserve a mention. So because of his goals, Gabriel Magalhaes in at third place for me and his superb defensive performances. Second place, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. I am going to put in a little bit of personal bias here, and I'm going to go with Kai Havertz at second place. Now, there will be a lot of people saying, what? We need a number 9. How are you putting our current number 9 when we need a number 9 in at second place? And look, I get it. Kai Havertz has he has different roles in this team. He can play up front, he can play in the 8, and we've relied on him in 2024 to play up front because until basically 2 weeks ago, Gabriel Jesus was not a serviceable option. So for me, that is a really, really big part of this discussion is actually he was brought in probably as an 8 to sometimes play up front, and now he has had to be repurposed to be a 9 who sometimes plays in midfield. And that's a real adjustment for him. He has to change how he plays, change the positions he plays in. And actually, I think he's done a fantastic job. Really want to get this message out there. Be careful what you wish for, Arsenal fans, because taking Kai Havertz out of this team could be a real problem if we don't put the right player in to replace him. They have to press just as well as Kai Havertz does. They have to allow us to go over the top like Kai Havertz does. They have to bring our wingers into play as much as Kai Havertz does. And also, when Martin Ødegaard was out, fair enough, it didn't work towards the end of it as people start to figure it out. But our replacement, that did work for Martin Ødegaard for a period, was Kai Havertz dropping in there, with Trossard playing in the middle with him. We talk about how irreplaceable Martin Ødegaard is. Kai Havertz actually picked that mantle up for a little period and did it well until the other teams kind of figured that system out. So I think, you really have to be careful what you wish for. We all want a striker who'll go out there and score 50 goals, but actually they cost at least 100 million quid now. And they're not any more resilient to going and breaking a leg or anything like that. We could spend 100 million quid and they could be injured in their first training session for the whole year. And that is a big, big risk, okay? No matter what happens, we will need Kai Havertz. If we sign Isak, we will need Kai Havertz. If we sign Sesko, we will need Kai Havertz. Whether that's him dropping into the 8 and doing that job with Mikel Merino and sharing those minutes there, or sharing minutes with whoever we get in up top, I don't really mind. I think he's a fantastic player who actually brings a lot to Arsenal. And it's all too easy to look at him and see his shortfalls. He's not the cleanest finisher in the world. I'll definitely admit that. Sometimes I think he could be a little bit more instinctive. I would totally take that. But he allows us to do a lot of different things and play a lot of different ways. And he's not an elite level player. He is not at the Kai Havertz, Bukayo Saka, Declan Rice level. He's not. But I think he is one rung below that. And not just one rung below that, but one rung below that in so many different aspects. He's a good finisher. He makes some good assists. He does a lot of pressing. He allows us to go over the top. He really works hard and fights. Do you remember the Liverpool game earlier this year where he was just fighting Van Dijk and Konate? He was just there making life miserable for them. He is brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. Just a couple of stats. Shot creating actions per 90, 3.36. He's in the 85th percentile for forwards for that metric. Really, really good. As well, goal or assist. Let's try that again. He has a goal or assist every 90... No, he has 0.62 goals and assists every 90 minutes in the last 365 days. It's not Haaland numbers. It's probably not even Isak numbers. And it's definitely not Bukayo Saka numbers, right? However, that's a really good return for a player who is typically a midfielder, has had to play some time in midfield, and is working really, really hard to do other stuff up front for us. So, Kai Havertz gets my second place, and that might be controversial. But like I said at the start, if you think that's controversial, do contact me on Blue Sky or contact me through your podcast provider and let me know your thoughts. Let me know your top 3 players. But first place, and I don't think there can be any argument about this one, Bukayo Saka. What a player this man has been for us in 2024. 0.92 goals or assists every single 90 minutes he's played. It's in the 94th percentile for attacking midfielders and wingers. And, he is an output machine. We have lost him to a hamstring injury recently, and we all hope he recovers really, really quickly and really well, of course. However, we do have to replace him because those numbers are incredible. He's also the 99th percentile for progressive passes received. And for me, that's a great stat for showing how reliant we are on a player. We send our attack down that side so often. We have many players, Ødegaard, Partey, Saliba, whose first thought is kind of open their body up and see where Bukayo Saka is. And his influence over this team is massive, not just in the way that he creates output for us, which is obviously really, really good and really high level, but in the way he is now a captain of the team. You know, if Odegaard's not on the pitch and Jorginho is not on the pitch, that man is wearing the armband, and he's 23 years old, by the way, for Arsenal Football Club. He is one of our own. He has embodied everything about the club that we know and love, and not only that, he is a super prodigious even talent. So, you know, I don't think he can be overlooked as our player of 2024. A couple of things to point out as well. He scored some really big goals. He scored some really big goals in 2024. I think the Bayern goal in the 11th minute in the first leg, I want to say, at the Emirates. Yes, it was the first leg. That was, for a minute there, I thought we were going to do them. I really did. And, you know, even by the end of that game, I thought we might have a chance. He was brilliant in that game, and that is some finish. The Liverpool goal this season against Andy Robertson, again, it's a big, you know, Liverpool are doing well. Arsenal are struggling. Can we go and beat them? I think it was the 8th minute. Ben White over the top, flicks it back. Great finish. Fantastic goal. Exactly what we needed. And you've got to think of that Euros performance versus Switzerland as well. Scoring a fantastic, very Bukayo Saka-esque goal. He's doing all of this, plus having all that time in his legs from England. So, you know, he's injured at the moment, and we must replace him. We must find a way to replace his output. But for me, he is easily Arsenal's player of 2024. That is it for this episode of the Arsenal Roundup, the 2024 year review. The episode 4 of the Arsenal Roundup, we will be back to a more typical news show covering the topics, the press conferences, where we're at in tables and competitions, and hopefully, because it'll be January by that point, talking about some juicy transfer rumours. Like I said halfway through, if you have enjoyed this podcast or any episode of Arsenal Unfiltered, or any episode of the Arsenal Roundup, I should say as well, please do consider hitting follow wherever you get your podcast provider from. It really, really helps the podcast grow, and it will make sure that you get 3 episodes completely free into your podcast provider every single week. All that's left to say now is I really hope you have had a wonderful 2024, and you have a really fantastic and safe New Year's Eve. And yeah, thank you for following, thank you for listening, and I'll speak to you very, very soon.